you've felt this before. Your heart races, your thoughts spiral, your body locks up. But here's the thing. Your brain thinks you're being chased by a bear, and it goes into protection mode to save you. This isn't a joke. Literally, your brain believes you need to escape a bear and reacts accordingly. As a neurobiologist, I spend my days studying how the brain works. A few years ago, on my way to work on the New York subway, I suddenly couldn't breathe, for no reason at all. My heart rate shot up, my hands trembled. My mind was screaming, something is very wrong. Everyone around me was going about their normal lives. And there I was, in a packed subway car, feeling like my life was in danger. As a brain researcher, I knew exactly what was happening to me in that moment. Knowing didn't stop me from feeling it. Today, that's exactly what we are going to talk about. What is anxiety? Why does anxiety exist evolutionarily? For a very logical reason. Our ancestors faced real threats, predatory animals, enemy tribes, starvation. Our brains developed over time to respond to these threats incredibly fast. Think about it this way. Back then, a person who thought slowly couldn't survive. The ones who thought fast, reacted fast, and sensed danger ahead managed to survive. Or let's say they didn't give up easily, and that trait was passed down through generations. Our brains are living in 2026, but the threat detection system is calibrated to 200,000 years ago. So how does this threat detection system work? Deep inside your brain, there are two small almond-shaped structures. The amygdala. You might remember it from our video on the psychopath brain, right? But this time we're going to look at it in a different way. The amygdala is the brain's alarm system. When it detects danger or thinks there's danger, it kicks in immediately. And when I say immediately, I mean really immediately, within milliseconds. What actually happens is the amygdala reacts before thinking. Before any logical analysis, it just says, danger, act now. What happens when this gets triggered? Cortisol and adrenaline flood the bloodstream. The heart speeds up, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense up. The digestive system slows down because it's not a priority right now. Blood gets directed to the organs needed for survival. So your body is preparing for one thing, fight or flight. Fighting is the honorable choice, by the way. On the other hand, my grandfather used to say, 99% of being a man is running. No need to be stupid. Anyway, let's get back to our topic. The moment the amygdala kicks in is when the tragedy of modern life begins. For our ancestors, this system was perfect. When you saw a real bear, your body needed to be ready to run. It reacted, you got away, the system calmed down, you survived. So in what way does your amygdala make you encounter a bear today? Your amygdala gets triggered when you're giving a presentation at a work meeting. It gets triggered when an email arrives from your boss or someone criticizes you on social media. It gets triggered when you wake up in the morning without anything happening, just thinking about how the day will go. If you're someone who makes YouTube videos, it gets triggered when your videos aren't getting views. Maybe the things that trigger you are different. While you pause the video, subscribe and hit the like button. Think about it and write it in the comments. Let's discuss. What are the things that cause you to get triggered? For the brain, there's no difference. It doesn't see the difference between a bear and an email. It gives the same biological response to both. This sounds familiar, right? Nothing happened, but why am I so anxious? Their heart had been racing since morning. Their hands were trembling. They hadn't been able to eat anything. When I heard this, I said with a smile, "Hey buddy, this is my field." I'm immediately activating my neurobiologist brain because this is exactly the amygdala giving a false alarm. There's no real threat. The body is reacting as if there's a life-threatening danger. We call this chronic anxiety. Maybe hundreds of millions of people have it. It's much more widespread than you think. So what do the numbers say? According to the World Health Organization, approximately 300 million people worldwide live with an anxiety disorder. In the US, 1 in 4 adults experiences clinical level anxiety at some point in their lives. Ready? The surprising part is coming. A new study published in May 2026 revealed that brain scans of people with anxiety disorders show noticeably low levels of choline in the prefrontal cortex. What is choline? A critical nutrient for brain health. It helps neurons communicate with each other. Memory, attention, emotional regulation. It plays a role in all of these. So anxiety isn't just overthinking. It shows there's a measurable physical deficiency in your brain. Wait, the interesting part doesn't end there. There's an even more interesting part. Do you remember the prefrontal cortex? The center of planning, decision-making, and emotional control. We came across it in our psychopath brain video, but here the problem is the exact opposite. In psychopathy, the prefrontal cortex doesn't communicate enough with the amygdala. which is why emotional responses remained weak. In anxiety, the prefrontal cortex communicates too much with the amygdala, but it's sending the wrong messages. The amygdala sounds the alarm. The prefrontal cortex says, stop, analyze, find a solution. Instead of finding a solution, it feeds itself. So think about it this way. There are two people. One never receives the danger signal. The other can barely live without receiving the danger signal. Neither is healthy, but they're going in completely opposite directions. Now, I'm going to remind you of something I'm sure has happened to you dozens of times. Have you ever had your mind constantly talking to itself when you're trying to sleep at night? What's going to happen at tomorrow's meeting? Did I send that message wrong? Is this pain something serious? Thoughts spin around in a spiral, and the more you try to stop them, instead of stopping, the talking speeds up. We call this rumination, and this is the most insidious aspect of anxiety. The amygdala sounds the alarm. The prefrontal cortex tries to analyze but can't find a solution because there's no real problem, just uncertainty. And the brain codes uncertainty as danger. The result? The cycle continues. You can't sleep. You wake up tired. When you're tired, the prefrontal cortex works even more weakly. The amygdala gets triggered more easily. And this is how the vicious cycle of chronic anxiety forms. Let me also say this. At this point, you might be thinking, so what can I do? Before I explain that, I need to say one more thing. Because trying to intervene without understanding how anxiety works is like trying to clean the smoke without putting out the fire. In other words, it's wasted effort. Why is anxiety so persistent? Because the brain learns. And unfortunately, in anxiety, it's learning the wrong things. With every perceived threat, the amygdala gets stronger. With every avoidance behavior, I'm not going to that meeting today. I'm not making that call. If I go there, I'll have a panic attack. The brain records. We did the right thing. We escaped the danger. We survived. But you didn't escape danger because there was no danger to escape. Scientists still aren't totally sure about everything, but neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reshape itself, works in both directions. You can reinforce anxiety or you can reduce it. This is one of the least understood but most important findings so far. Last year at a conference, I met a researcher who said something interesting. Anxiety treatment is essentially teaching the brain something new, they said. We're not trying to stop the amygdala from sounding the alarm. We're teaching the prefrontal cortex to respond to that alarm in a different way. This changed something for me, because thinking of anxiety not as a bad trait, but as a wrongly trained system was a very different angle. So how does this retraining happen? There's strong evidence on a few things. Breathing training. It sounds surface level, I know. But the vagus nerve, the major communication line between the brain and body, is sensitive to breathing rhythm. When you breathe slowly and deeply, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. The signal danger is past goes out. The amygdala calms down. This happens within seconds and is measurable. Exposure training, slowly approaching what you've been avoiding in a controlled, safe environment. Each time, the brain says, look, we survived, there was no danger, and starts to learn. The amygdala's response starts to weaken too. Sleep training. The prefrontal cortex repairs itself during sleep. With sleep deprivation, the prefrontal cortex works weakly. The amygdala gets triggered more easily. Sleep quality is directly related to anxiety severity. Let me tell you one more interesting thing. We said a lot of interesting things today, didn't we? Do you remember that choline study from May 2026? Low choline levels in the prefrontal cortex are linked to anxiety. So where does choline come from? Eggs, fish, broccoli, beans. So while billions of dollars are currently being spent on anxiety medications, research is saying that diet directly affects the brain's chemistry. This doesn't replace treatment, but it's not a finding to be ignored either. I want to be honest with you. There's still so much we don't understand about anxiety. Why do some people experience trauma and not develop anxiety? Why do some people live with chronic anxiety for no obvious reason? How much does genetics play a role? How much does environment? Scientists haven't been able to fully understand all of this yet. Actually, this doesn't bother me. On the contrary, it motivates me. Because every new study puts another piece of this puzzle in place. Every piece we find changes the lives of real people. Let me go back to the subway story I told at the beginning of our video. After experiencing that panic in the subway car that day, my neurobiologist brain kicked in and I thought, okay, the amygdala gave a false alarm. The prefrontal cortex misread the context. Choline levels are probably low because I haven't slept properly for 2 days. This analysis didn't stop the panic in that moment, but it made a difference for the next time. Because there's a big difference between knowing there's no danger and teaching your brain that, and closing that gap takes time. So yeah, anxiety is complicated. There's no simple answer, but understanding what's happening in your brain means at least knowing what you're fighting against. And that's not a small thing. If this video made you think, or made you say, I experienced this too, Think with New is here exactly for that. Every week we explore the most fascinating corners of brain science. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments what triggers your anxiety the most. I'm genuinely curious. See you next week.